So there is some chaos in the skies, leaving Americans more and more concerned whether it's even safe to fly. It's no secret that there's been several dramatic aviation incidents this year alone, one of the most well-known being the fatal collision of the Black Hawk helicopter with American Airlines Flight 5342.
And now, Newark's International Airport has been drawing ire for its dysfunction. It's being branded as a national embarrassment by Drudge. New Jersey's air traffic controllers agree. According to exclusive reporting by NBC, one air traffic controller said to avoid the airport at all costs.
Despite that, insiders at the FAA are defending the administration and air travel. I recently interviewed the former head of the FAA. He thinks DEI should be reviewed by the FAA and agrees with President Trump's targeting. Let's take a look.
When you hear the president say that some of the issues that are happening are related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, how does that sit with you?
Look, well, having run the agency, here's what I say. It's a fair point to make that should we look to say how efficient, right? After all, agencies, those are public, those are dollars coming out of taxpayers' pockets. So you want the most, the best bang for the buck. My focus, and I think the focus of every administrator who has sat in that chair, is how well are we running the agency? Does it have the resources? By resources, I mean the funding, I mean the people, and I mean the expertise it needs to ensure, first and foremost, that the flying public is safe, that secondly, that is efficient, and then that this entity, no matter what the agency, has the ability to carry America over the next 30 to 50 years, right?
So who is to blame for all of these incidents? Is it DEI, or could it be Trump, or could it be Biden's policies?
Really interesting interview there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's great. Interesting to hear those thoughts. Yeah, there's clearly tremendous concern among the American public about whether it's safe to fly. I've always been someone, and we've interviewed guests on this show about airplane safety, about problems with Boeing
Right.
a number of times. I've always kind of been someone pushing back and saying, well, I look at the actual statistics, and airplane travel remains incredibly safe compared to basically anything else, particularly compared to driving anywhere. We have so many
Right.
fatal car crashes every year. Planes almost never drop out of the sky. It's like zero. We've had nearly zero plane crashes. We've had the door break off and somebody got sucked out. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't bad things that happen, but on a statistical level, it's remained very safe. However, when you see things like what happened just a couple miles from where we're sitting right now a few
Right.
weeks ago, that horrific, now that wasn't a problem with the plane, problem with the helicopter driving into it. I understand why people are, a lot more alarmed. So when you hear people, those who work at the FAA raising concerns, whether it's DEI, whether it's a lack of proper training, whether it's, whatever it is, that it needs to be made safe.
And I think there's a real conversation about the people that work at the FAA being exhausted, the rigorous training that you need to go through, rightfully so, to be like an air traffic controller or a pilot. I mean, these are not jobs that come easy. There's like several tests and, mentally fit tests, physically fit tests, like all these different layers of statuses you have to get past in order just to get a job. So we're not talking about just willy-nilly hiring a homeboy or homegirl.
Well, no, and here's the problem I have, though. The amount of hours you have to train to become a pilot in the U.S. is higher than anywhere else in the advanced world. It's twice as long as in Europe and I think Canada.
Doesn't that make you feel safer?
No, it doesn't. It makes me feel like it's needless regulation that raises the cost of flying. If it's safe enough for France and England and Canada and Switzerland, that's safe enough. It was raised as an industry protection to fight competition for jobs, and so raises the cost for everyone else. And I should point out that the helicopter crash was not a problem. Now, piloting helicopters seems to be quite a different animal and much, much more difficult.
Right.
It requires a lot of difficult maneuvering. I know a helicopter pilot. I've learned something about it from talking with him. This route where the helicopter that crashed into the plane in D.C. it sounds like a terrible idea, and it was set up very badly, that the helicopters are just flying way too close to the planes. Having read, there was an exhaustive New York Times report on this last week that I read. It was very interesting. Having read it, it doesn't sound to me, well, the plane didn't do anything wrong, the person flying the plane. It actually doesn't even sound like an FAA failure either. The helicopter pilot was warned to change direction and simply didn't. It sounded like human error on the part of the helicopter pilot.
Right.
Now, maybe you would call it reasonable human error in that it's a very tricky maneuver to pull off, flying this helicopter so close to planes right over the Potomac in D.C. with lights everywhere, but still that it was mostly, there was proper instruction given to the helicopter pilot to divert, that they were flying either too low or too high, I can't remember, and they just didn't follow that instruction.
Right. I read that report, and I think that's why it's important to look at how, and this is not to bring it to Trump, Biden, or DI, this is to have a full conversation about everything. I think what Trump did his first few days in office is target DEI and then attach that directly to the FAA. And what we saw in early this year is a plane crash and then speculation that Trump said immediately this could be due to DEI. And I think that was really confusing to me because the FAA publicly promoted diversity from 2013 to 2020, which includes Trump's first term. So he was okay with it then and then made it an initiative and tied it to a plane crash that it had nothing to do with. And I think when we look at those numbers, and even the interview, I was surprised. It was a great interview with Billy Nolan, and I was surprised to hear his answer. But the reality check on pilot demographics is actually 90% of airline pilots in the U.S. are white men. Black pilots are 3.4%, Latino pilots 0.5%, and women 4.6%. So when we're talking about the layers of diversity and disabilities, these are not people that are manning air traffic control or piloting. These are just people that they said could be in the corporate part of the FAA, in marketing. Like, these are several roles.
And again, it comes
throughout
down
the
to then
agency.
what we mean by DEI. If you mean doing outreach to underrepresented or whatever groups to make them aware of jobs they could apply to, then it's fine. If it's about lowering standards to achieve a workforce that is more matches the overall population, then I'm certainly against that, and most people are against that. We're not going to lower our standards. You can do outreach to people. Oh, no, this is why being a pilot is a great job. If you're interested, you should apply. That's fine if that's what we mean by DEI. If what we mean is it's okay that you scored worse on this test because we really want more female pilots or Latino pilots or whatever, then I'm pretty against that, and so is the vast majority of the American people.
And I think it's important to differentiate. Like, diversity, equity, and inclusion means leveling the playing field, not lowering the standards. And so if there are just natural reasons why you would just hire somebody who looks more like you or include people that are naturally in your vicinity, then that's not fair.
Of course, that's what every elite college did for years, though.
What,
just exactly that?
No, they
lowered
didn't.
The
No, they
standards.
did not lower standards. People were
Sure they
superseding.
did.
People of color that
No,
made
they
it to
absolutely-
Harvard had to go through several more things for the most part if they're coming from communities.
But they were accepted with lower test scores than
I don't think that's actually factual.
It's absolutely
No, I actually
yes.
would. I would debate you to the end of time about that.
The
and I
points
think
you
that
needed to be admitted to elite colleges were lower if you were a non-Asian.
No, I think that it's actually.
I mean, it's forbidden now because the Supreme Court said that's racial discrimination. You can't do it, which is correct. But
yeah, but I think these programs were put in place to protect and bring people of color into the rooms of all diverse backgrounds because usually they're not included in the conversation, and it's never based on
that might be why they were done. But the method of doing that involved lowering the standards for non-Asian applicants to elite universities.
We're gonna have to agree to disagree.
Okay.
Next up, AOC opening the floodgates on a hotly contested House leadership fight. Stay tuned.